I never believed in the stories, the kind you hear around campfires, whispered warnings about places no sane person dares to tread. But here I am, deep in the heart of a foreign jungle, where the sunlight barely pierces the thick canopy, and every sound feels like a warning. Last night, something moved just beyond my campfire's glow, a shadow that didn't belong to any animal I know. I froze, heart pounding, listening to the silence pressing in from all sides. It's like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. If you're watching this, I want you to do me a favor. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, what country, what city. I want to know who's out there, listening to my story. Because what happened next, it's something I can't explain. And I'm not sure I want to.
I've worked in dangerous places before. Deserts, war zones, jungles, you name it. But nothing prepared me for this. Not the unbearable humidity, not the silence that clung to everything like wet cloth, and definitely not the way the trees seemed to shift when you weren't looking. I arrived 2 days ago. The mission was straightforward. At least, that's what they told me. Gather data for an environmental study funded by a small American firm concerned with illegal logging in a remote stretch of jungle in Southeast Asia. A week in the field, satellite tracker, preloaded maps, a local guide. It all looked good on paper. But even from the moment the chopper descended through the canopy, I knew something was off. The trees parted reluctantly, like we weren't supposed to be there. When the skids touched the mossy floor, I stepped out with my gear strapped tight and my nerves even tighter. The pilot kept the rotors spinning, didn't even kill the engine. I turned to give him a nod, a casual thumbs up, but he didn't return it. He just stared. Not angry, not tired, just blank. Like he already knew something I didn't. Then he turned, lifted off, and vanished over the treetops, leaving me alone in a heat so thick it felt like I was being smothered by a damp towel. I stood in the clearing, staring into the dense green ahead, backpack digging into my shoulders, and tried to ignore the gnawing feeling at the base of my spine. Something was wrong. The silence was the first thing. Jungles are supposed to be loud. You hear it even in documentaries: birds, insects, frogs, monkeys. Life. But here, it was like the entire forest was holding its breath. The only sound was the faint buzz of my GPS and the occasional creak of branches swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. I set off on the trail marked on my map, but there were no markers, no ribbons, no footprints. Only faint indentations in the moss that could have been anything. The jungle swallowed the path quickly, as if it resented being walked. Still, I pushed on. Every step deeper felt like wading into the lungs of something ancient and breathing. Trees rose like cathedral pillars, vines hung like veins, shadows stretched too far in every direction, and time became hard to measure. I walked for hours. By late afternoon, I made camp near a slow-moving river. It was the first water source I'd seen, and even that looked wrong. The surface didn't ripple. There were no fish, no bugs, just stagnant, glassy water, reflecting a gray sky that hadn't been there 10 minutes before. I set up my tent, cooked a can of stew, and tried not to think too much. That night, everything changed. I just lay down inside my tent when I heard it, a soft sound, like someone dragging their fingertips across a drum skin, faint, but distinct, coming from outside. I froze, waited. There it was, again. Closer this time, not footsteps, Not an animal. It was deliberate. I slowly unzipped the flap and peeked out. The jungle was dark, but I'd set up a small perimeter light, just enough to see maybe 5 feet out. Nothing moved. I stepped out quietly, flashlight in hand, scanning the brush. Snap. A branch broke, not 20 feet from where I stood. I whipped the light around. Nothing. But the beam landed on something odd. A vine hanging from a tree that was swaying slightly. No wind, no movement. Just that one vine. And I realized it wasn't a vine. It was a braid of hair. Long, black, dull in the light, just hanging there, twisting gently like it was breathing. I backed away slowly, keeping the flashlight steady. My mind raced. Was it some kind of tribal warning? An old offering? A trick? Then the whisper came. Low, right at my ear. Not from the jungle, but from behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing. Only my tent, only the firelight, only silence. I didn't sleep that night. By sunrise, I was already packing. I told myself I'd find higher ground, a signal, maybe reach the old research outpost they said still exists deeper north, anything to get away from that river. The deeper I went, the worse it got. The jungle didn't just feel heavy, it leaned in. The trees were closer, the canopy darker. I began to see things out of the corner of my eye, shapes that vanished when I turned, movement where there should be none. The air grew thick with a smell I couldn't place, sweet and rotten like fruit that died weeks ago. Around midday, I stumbled across something that made me stop cold. A tree, massive and ancient, split clean down the middle, not by lightning. There was no burn, no char, no scorch marks, just a raw, perfect vertical tear like something opened it from the inside. On the trunk, smeared across the bark, was a handprint. Human. Fresh. I crouched to examine it, but I didn't touch it. The lines were sharp, no drag marks, no smears, just placed, deliberate. I backed away. 15 minutes later, I found the camp. 2 tents, collapsed and rotting, partially overgrown. Gear was scattered, half buried in mud and leaves, a pot still hanging over a long dead fire. Everything looked abandoned hastily. I called out, hopeful. Nothing. The tents were in bad shape. One had deep gashes across the canvas, like claws had torn through it. The other looked almost intact, until I unzipped it. Inside was a sleeping bag soaked with blood, dried now, brown and crusted. No body. I checked the area again. No drag marks, no footprints. But then I spotted a notebook. Water damaged, curled with age but still legible. I flipped through the pages. The last entry was written in messy, shaking letters. It watches. Not all the time, only when you think you're alone. We saw it in the trees. We heard it whisper names it shouldn't know. Yesterday it called mine. It sounded like my brother, but he's been dead for 10 years. I read it 3 times. Then I closed the book and turned to leave. And that's when I saw it. On a nearby tree, carved with something sharp, were words. Thin, neat, controlled. We don't belong here. Below it, another word. Repeated. Scratched over and over until the bark bled. Kunanet. I took a photo. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to remind myself it was real. I didn't stop moving that night. I walked until my legs gave out. I didn't build a fire. I didn't pitch a tent. I sat against the roots of a gnarled tree with my machete in one hand and my flashlight in the other, daring the darkness to move. But it didn't need to, because every once in a while, I heard it whisper my name. Not from behind, not from the side, but from inside my head.
I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow again, moving just beyond the firelight, silent and wrong. I've hunted, camped, and tracked in dozens of countries, but this felt different. Like the forest didn't want me here, like it was watching, listening. By dawn, the fire had turned to cold ash. The humidity had thickened overnight, and the air felt like soup. My clothes clung to me like a second skin, soaked through with sweat and mist. Every step I took stirred up the scent of rot and damp earth. I packed my gear with numb hands, mind fogged with fear and fatigue. That's when I saw them. Footprints. At first I thought they were mine, muddy and half washed away by the early morning dew. But something was off. These prints were larger, wider, and wrong. The stride was off, too long for a human, too uniform to be random. The pressure points were deep, like whatever made them was unnaturally heavy, but not wide like a bear or wildcat. And the toes, God, they were long, talon-shaped, curling slightly inward as if gripping the soil, clawed like a bird's foot, only massive, maybe size 14 or 15, but thinner. They left an impression of something standing upright, bipedal, but it wasn't human. I crouched beside them, instinct screaming. I've seen tracks of every kind, human, animal, even the occasional malformed ones left by smugglers trying to throw off pursuit. But this was something else, something that wasn't supposed to exist. I should have walked away. Instead, I followed them. The tracks led away from my campsite and into the denser part of the jungle, where the canopy above grew thicker, blocking out most of the sunlight. The light turned sickly green, and everything took on a surreal underwater hue. Every sound felt amplified, the buzzing of insects, the distant call of birds, even my own breathing. About a mile in, I noticed the silence. Not total silence, no. This was worse. It was the kind of silence that's full of suppressed noise, like everything alive had gone still, holding its breath. The jungle wasn't empty, it was hiding. And something was walking with me. I don't mean metaphorically, I mean I could hear it. Crunches in the underbrush, always behind me, always just out of sight, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right. Never close enough to confront, but always near, always following. I called out once, "Hello?" Nothing answered, but the sounds stopped. That was somehow worse. Around mid-morning, I reached a clearing. Small, maybe 20 feet across, but wrong, dead wrong. There were no birds, no insects, not even movement. The air felt like it was pressing down on me. The trees at the edges of the clearing bent slightly outward, as if they had tried to grow away from the center. And in the middle was a mark in the dirt, long, wide, like something had been dragged, about the size of a human body, only it wasn't a body. There were no blood stains, no scuffle marks, just a long, deep impression, as if something had been pulled smoothly along the earth, dragged, or slithered. I crouched and touched the soil. Cold, damp. Whatever made the mark, it had been recent. Then came the whispering. It started like wind, gentle, brushing past my ears. Then it turned into something else. Voices. Not words I could understand. Breathless, low, vibrating through the ground more than the air. It came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. I stood and turned slowly, trying to find the source. I felt it circling me. Not physically, not yet, but spiritually maybe, like I'd stepped into something sacred or cursed. Behind me, snap. I spun, weapon raised, finger hovering over the trigger. But there was nothing there. Just trees, just shadows, just the jungle pretending to be empty. I backed out, step by step, never turning my back on that clearing until I was well into the brush again. The whispering faded, but the tracks didn't stop. They continued, leading deeper into terrain that grew stranger with each mile. The trees twisted into unnatural shapes, some of them hollowed out like tunnels, others fused together at their trunks like conjoined twins. I passed a fallen log with strange gouges on its bark, parallel, precise, like claws dragging downward with unnatural force. That's when I realized I hadn't seen another living creature in hours. No monkeys, no birds, not even bugs. Just trees, just the sound of my own breathing, and the feeling that I was being led somewhere. I don't remember when I stopped following the tracks and started chasing them, but I did. At some point, it became an obsession. I had to know what it was. I had to see it. The shape from the night before, the one that circled my camp. It was real. It was out here, and it wanted me to follow. The terrain dropped suddenly, the jungle spilling into a ravine filled with moss and sharp, jagged rocks. I slipped once, banged my elbow on a stone, but I kept moving. My hands were scraped raw, but I didn't care. I was close. That's when I found the cave. It wasn't on any of my maps. Half covered in vines, its mouth yawned open like a wound in the earth. The air pouring from it was ice cold, unnatural for a jungle at this elevation. It smelled like old stone, like wet decay and something else, something ancient, something wrong. And then it moved again, just inside the cave's mouth. This time I saw more, a flash of limbs, long and sinewy, a face that wasn't quite a face, eyes that glowed faintly, too wide and human-shaped, but with no white, just a soft, predatory shimmer in the darkness. I froze. It saw me, and it smiled. I swear to God, it smiled. Not with a mouth, with its presence, like it knew something I didn't. Like it was playing a game I hadn't realized I was in. Then it vanished. Not ran, not ducked. It simply wasn't there anymore. Like blinking away a hallucination. But I knew better. I knew it was real. I should have run, but I didn't. I stepped closer, parting the vines with trembling hands. The mouth of the cave loomed in front of me, swallowing all light. I flicked on my headlamp. The beam pierced a few feet into the darkness, catching nothing but rock. I took a deep breath, and I entered.
The first thing I noticed was the cold. It hit me the moment I stepped inside the cave. Sharp, biting cold that didn't belong in a jungle. It wrapped around me like a wet sheet, settling deep in my bones, and made the sweat on my back feel like ice. My breath came out in clouds. I took another step. The beam from my headlamp cut a narrow line into the darkness, illuminating only a few feet ahead. Everything beyond that was black. Not the kind of black you get at night. This was thicker, heavier, like it absorbed the light. The walls were slick with moisture and covered in patches of a strange bioluminescent moss that pulsed faintly, like it had a heartbeat. I hesitated at the threshold. I should have turned around. I should have marked my location and reported it. I should have done 100 things other than keep going. But I couldn't stop myself. Something deeper than curiosity had me now. I was being pulled forward, compelled. The cave walls narrowed as I advanced, forcing me to crouch. The ceiling dipped low, sharp with limestone teeth, and the floor sloped downward at an unnatural angle. My boots crunched over gravel and bones. Yes, bones. Some small, others long and curved in ways I didn't recognize. I told myself they were animal remains, probably monkeys, maybe deer. Anything but what I feared. The deeper I went, the more unnatural it became. The air stopped moving. There was no breeze, no echo of my footsteps. It was as if the cave had swallowed sound. Even my breathing sounded distant, like I was listening to it from underwater. My ears popped from the pressure, and my head pounded from the elevation change, or maybe something else entirely. After about 200 feet, the passage opened into a chamber. The headlamp revealed massive columns of stone rising from the floor and meeting the ceiling like natural pillars. They shimmered with condensation and strange mineral streaks. But what caught my attention were the carvings. All along the walls. Symbols, figures, etchings carved deep into the stone, weathered with age, but unmistakably deliberate. They weren't like anything I'd seen before. Not Mayan, not Incan, not any known tribe. They twisted in spirals, sharp angles, and circular patterns that seemed to vibrate if I stared too long. Some showed humanoid figures bowing toward a central shape, a tall being with elongated limbs and no face. The same silhouette I saw outside. My stomach turned. This cave wasn't just a hole in the earth. It was a temple, or a tomb. I moved forward slowly, sweeping my light across the walls. My footsteps echoed faintly now, bouncing off the stone, accompanied by the soft drip of water somewhere far off. I stepped carefully, avoiding any loose rocks or bones, keeping my weapon in one hand and my flashlight in the other. Something skittered across the wall beside me. I spun, but there was nothing. I backed toward the far end of the chamber where the carvings grew denser and more frantic, etched over each other like whoever made them had done so in desperation. I found another passage there, narrow, claustrophobic. The air pouring from it smelled different, drier, almost metallic. I ducked and stepped through. This tunnel was even tighter. The rock pressed in on me from both sides, rough and jagged. My boots scraped the walls. I had to stoop low, nearly crawling. The silence was oppressive. Every movement I made felt wrong, too loud than it should be, too sharp. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being heard, tracked. I reached a small alcove maybe 30 feet in. That's where I found the second campsite. It wasn't much, just a torn canvas bag, some broken equipment, and a flare canister. But it was recent, within weeks, maybe even days. The flare still had charge, and the bag hadn't succumbed to mold yet. Someone had been here. Someone like me. Or maybe not like me at all. The gear looked military grade, not standard jungle expedition supplies. Tactical. And beside the bag, half hidden beneath a blanket, was a journal. I flipped through it. Most of the pages were soaked through, but a few entries were legible. It watches. We never see it. We only hear it. 5 men gone. No blood. Just taken. The carvings match the ones from the old village. The locals warned us. They begged us not to come. Something ancient sleeps here.
something we should never have woken. I stopped reading. That was enough. I pocketed the journal, heart pounding, and turned to leave the alcove, only to hear the sound again. Breathing. Not mine. It came from deeper in the tunnel. Wet, shallow, rhythmic. I killed my light. Stupid, maybe, but instinct took over. I backed into the wall, barely breathing, finger hovering over the trigger of my rifle. My eyes adjusted slowly to the pitch black, but I could see nothing, only the sound. It moved closer, and then it stopped. Silence. No breath, no step, nothing. I held still for 10 full minutes, frozen, waiting. Then I turned the light back on in one quick motion, blinding the tunnel with white. Nothing. Just rock. But on the wall ahead of me, fresh scratches, deep gouges, 4 of them, claw marks. I turned and ran. I didn't care about noise anymore. I scrambled back through the tunnel, banging my shoulders, scraping my elbows. I burst into the main chamber again and didn't stop. I ran for the cave's entrance like something was at my heels. And maybe it was. I didn't look back. By the time I reached the outside, the sun was already fading. Hours had passed. The jungle looked different, darker, quieter, like it knew where I'd been. I collapsed beside the entrance, gasping, shaking, drenched in cold sweat. I had no idea what I had just encountered, but one thing was clear. I hadn't imagined it, and I wasn't the first to find it. I looked back toward the cave. The entrance seemed smaller now, unremarkable, just another shadow in the jungle. But I knew better. It was watching, waiting. Something in there wasn't finished with me yet. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I knew I'd be going back.
I didn't sleep that night. Even after I put miles between me and the cave, even after I reached the temporary base camp I'd set up along the river 2 days prior, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. I kept hearing it. Low, deliberate breathing, just outside the perimeter, just beyond the trees. When I turned my light in that direction, there was never anything there. But the jungle was too quiet. It hadn't returned to normal. Birds stayed silent. Frogs didn't sing. Not even the mosquitoes buzzed like they used to. It was like everything was holding its breath. I packed up at first light, not bothering to eat. I wanted distance, I wanted answers, I wanted out. But more than that, I needed to talk to someone. Anyone. That's when I remembered the village, a few miles back from my original drop point, nestled near the tree line before the dense interior. I'd passed it briefly on the way in. I remember the stares, long, silent, almost mournful, from the old men and women sitting under wooden porches, watching me like I was already a ghost. Back then, I thought it was just superstition. Now, I wasn't so sure. I reached the village by noon. It was quiet, not empty, but withdrawn, like the people were hiding in plain sight. Most huts had their doors half closed, curtains drawn. A few children played barefoot near a well, but when they saw me, they ran inside without a word. Then I saw him, the old man. He'd been there the first time, tall for his age, with leathery skin and deep eyes that looked older than the earth. He sat on a stool beneath a crooked mango tree, chewing something bitter, a worn machete resting on his lap. He looked up as I approached. "You went to the cave," he said in English, his accent thick but clear. Not a question, a statement. I nodded slowly. He spit the chew into the dirt and wiped his mouth. "You shouldn't have." "I know, but I need to understand what I saw." He looked me over, not just with his eyes, but with something deeper, like he was measuring my soul,
or what was left of it. "Come," he said, standing slowly, "but only for a short time. You have already brought it too close." We entered his hut. Inside was dim, lit by slats of sunlight slicing through gaps in the walls. The air smelled of smoke and herbs. Symbols were carved into every surface, the floor, the walls, even the ceiling beams. Not decorative, protective. "You think it's just a place," he began, settling into a low chair. "But that cave is older than this land, older than names. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to it." He paused, looking at me with tired eyes. "It sleeps, yes, but not like you or me. It waits. When the forest is too quiet, that is when it listens. That is when it sees who is foolish enough to come close." I swallowed hard. "You mean the thing in the carvings?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached behind a wooden crate and pulled out a rolled animal hide. He unrolled it slowly on the floor. It was painted in faded red and black pigments. There it was again, the tall, faceless figure, always surrounded by bowed shapes, always emerging from jagged lines that represented mountains or deep earth. "We call it Ishkora," he whispered, "the shadow between roots. It was here long before men came. It was fed by the old tribes. They believed it gave visions, power, but what it gave was madness." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "I found remains, bones, equipment, maybe another team, maybe military." He nodded grimly. "Not the first, won't be the last." I pulled out the journal I'd found in the cave. His face tightened as he took it, flipping through the damp pages with a kind of dread. After a few moments, he handed it back. "Some came with guns, others with science, but it doesn't matter. You can't kill what sleeps in no time. You can't measure what breathes beneath dreams." I didn't know how to respond. Instead, I asked the only question that really mattered. Why did no one stop me? He looked away. "We warned you, like we warn them all. But warnings are for those who still listen to the world. You came with noise, with metal. You didn't come to hear. You came to own." His words hit me harder than I expected. I stood up, pacing the small hut. "There's something in there," I muttered. "Something real. Not myth, not imagination. I felt it. I heard it." He nodded solemnly. "You've been marked." I froze. "What?" "You entered its space. You saw its signs. You carried its silence back with you. Now it knows your name. Not the one your mother gave you, the one beneath it." I stared at him, heart thudding. "I didn't touch anything," I whispered. "You don't need to. You woke something, and now it waits." "Waits for what?" He stood slowly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "For the next time you sleep too deeply. For the next time you forget the sound of the forest. It waits for the day you forget fear." I left the village soon after. Not because I was done listening, but because I could feel it creeping closer. Even in daylight, the shadows had changed. They clung longer to my boots. They whispered in the rustle of leaves behind me. The jungle didn't want me anymore. I didn't belong here. Not above ground, not below. And I realized something that shook me deeper than any monster ever could. I wasn't scared of going back to that cave. I was scared of what would happen if I didn't.
I didn't want to go back. Every cell in my body screamed against it, but fear has a strange way of reshaping logic. The longer I stayed away from that place, the more it felt like the jungle was closing in, not just around me, but inside me. Like I'd brought something out, and it was unraveling me from within. 3 days after leaving the village, I woke up in the middle of the night. My fire was still burning low, my gear untouched. No animals around, nothing moved. But I had dirt under my nails. My boots were wet with something black. I didn't remember walking. I'd started sleepwalking. And always, I was heading back toward the cave. Something had its claws in me now. Not physically, not yet, but I could feel its grip tightening. I needed to go back, not just to face it, but to understand what it wanted. That was how I justified it. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't going back to learn. I was going back because it was calling me. I retraced my steps along the dried riverbed, then through the burnt trees, then past the broken shrine, or what I once believed was a shrine. Now I wasn't sure. Maybe it wasn't there to protect something sacred. Maybe it was meant to keep something in. I reached the mouth of the cave by dusk. I stood there for a long time, just staring. The entrance hadn't changed, but the air had. It smelled metallic now, like copper and moss and old blood. The vines I had cleared were starting to grow back, curling unnaturally fast across the stone, like veins trying to seal a wound. I lit my torch and stepped inside. The cold hit immediately, deeper than before, like the cave remembered me. I moved slowly, scanning the walls, stepping over the same collapsed gear from the last time. The silence wasn't just oppressive now. It listened. I felt watched, followed, not by eyes, but something behind the walls moving when I wasn't. Then I heard it again, that whisper. Not words, just presence, like breath on the back of your neck, like a voice trying to form just below hearing. I pressed deeper, passing the cracked chamber where I'd found the journal. Beyond that was a part I hadn't reached before, a narrow tunnel half collapsed, just wide enough to crawl through. I hesitated. Then I got on my hands and knees and entered. It felt like hours before the tunnel opened again. I emerged into a larger chamber, this one unnatural. Perfect symmetry, smooth stone, carved symbols, not tribal, geometric, precise. The walls hummed. There were signs of recent presence, boot prints, fragments of torn packs, a rusted rifle bent in half like it had been twisted by something strong. But no bodies. And on the far side of the chamber, a door. Not a metaphor, a real door, metal, half open, old, but too modern to be native. It had no labels, no locks, just strange dents in the steel, like claw marks or fingers that pressed too hard. I stepped inside. The room beyond was impossible. It was a lab. Not a large one, maybe 2 rooms, but it had lights, long dead bulbs, emergency panels, old terminals caked in dust. A nameplate on the floor read USGS, United States Geological Survey. There had been a team here, but not just scientists. There were weapons racks, monitoring equipment, recording devices, files now mostly decayed. This wasn't a research station. It was a containment site, and someone or something had breached it. I moved through the space carefully, scanning shelves, reading scraps of old notes. The language shifted from geology to something darker. Unexplained energy readings, geometric anomalies, behavioral corruption in team members, delusions, hallucinations. Then one line stood out, burned into a torn logbook.
It does not want to be understood. It wants to be remembered. My stomach turned. In the far wall of the lab was a hole, not a crack, a clean circular breach. Something had broken in or out. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw the camera. Still mounted, still pointing at the breach, still blinking red. It was still powered. I didn't know how. There was no generator hum, no solar source, nothing should have been functional. I tapped the panel. The last recording started to play. The footage was grainy, no sound, but I saw a man, mid-30s, bearded, wearing a torn USGS jacket, standing in the lab, pacing frantically. He kept turning to the wall, yelling into the hole. Then he stopped, and something stepped through. It was wrong. Even through the static and shadows, I could tell it didn't move like anything human. It didn't walk. It flowed. No clear face, no clear form, just tall and aware. The man fell to his knees, then to his side. Then he began convulsing. The figure leaned down and touched his head. And in that moment, the camera glitched. Not in a technological way. It felt like the image itself rejected being watched. The screen smeared with symbols I couldn't understand. The feed ended. I stared at the blank monitor, frozen. Something behind me whispered. I spun around, torch shaking. Nothing there. But the shadows had shifted. They were crawling along the walls now, not moving with the flame, moving against it, pushing back, twisting. I backed out, step by step. Then I ran. I didn't stop until I was halfway through the tunnel, crawling on my stomach, dirt in my mouth, heart in my throat. Behind me, I heard that sound again, like breathing, but deeper, not lungs, the earth itself, as if the cave was alive and now exhaling after holding it in for too long. I burst out into the open night, gasping. The jungle greeted me with silence. No wind, no insects. The sky above was cloudless, but wrong. The stars looked misplaced, shifted, like the sky didn't recognize me anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat. I just stared at the trees, waiting for them to move. And in the distance, behind the vines and stone and centuries of warnings, I knew. I hadn't just walked into the cave. I had opened a door that should have stayed buried.
I left the cave, but the silence didn't stay behind. At first I thought I was just shaken. Trauma does strange things. It rewires the senses, scrambles time. But this was different. This was targeted. It wasn't paranoia. It was presence. The feeling that something had stepped through the breach in that ancient stone and chosen me. I kept walking. I didn't care about direction anymore. I just needed distance. But the jungle was no longer familiar. The trails were wrong. Paths I knew by heart looped back on themselves. Trees stood in places I swore were clearings. Even the insects were quiet. The jungle had stopped breathing. And then I noticed the real pattern. The farther I walked, the quieter it got. Not gradually, deliberately, like sound was being drained around me. My footsteps, at first crunching under dried leaves, became muffled, then inaudible. My breathing no longer echoed inside my own skull. It was as if reality itself was folding inward, dragging me to a place where only it could speak. I stumbled into a village 2 days later, not the one from before. This one was smaller, deeper inland. No marked paths, no roads, just huts built into the roots of massive trees.
The people were quiet, not in fear, in reverence, like they already knew. An old man met me at the edge. He didn't ask who I was. He just looked at my hands. "You opened it," he said. His English was fractured, but the message cut clean. He led me to a hut and offered food. I couldn't eat, not because I wasn't hungry, I was starving, but because everything tasted like ash. The old man sat across from me, silent for a long time. Then he said, "There's a name for what follows you, but we don't speak it. Speaking it is like looking at it." I didn't press. I just asked one thing. "Has it happened before?" He nodded. "Not in many generations, but yes. The mountain breathes. Every breath something escapes." I asked what it wanted. He looked at me, eyes dark and wet. "Memory." Then he added, almost whispering, "But not yours. It wants to become yours." I stayed in that village for 3 days. I barely slept. At night, I'd hear movement around my hut, not footsteps, displacement, air shifting, wood creaking, like something heavy without mass was circling me. I began to dream in languages I didn't speak, symbols, fractals, geometries spinning like stars. I'd wake up with blood running from my nose, mouth dry, throat raw like I'd been screaming. The villagers kept their distance, except the old man. He gave me a pouch, small, leather, filled with ashes and what looked like bone fragments. "Keep it on your chest," he said. "Not to protect you, to remind it that you remember what you did." I asked if that worked. He didn't answer. I left at dawn on the 4th day. The jungle seemed calmer now, but I wasn't fooled. It had changed because I had changed. The thing wasn't hiding. It didn't need to. It had already marked me. On the 2nd day of my return trek, I found my old camp, but someone had been there. Everything was turned over. The tent was slashed, my backup journal was gone, and scrawled across a tree trunk in a strange charcoal black script I didn't recognize were 4 words burned into the bark. "It walks where you remember." I turned and threw up. That night I set up a fire and sat with my rifle across my knees. I didn't blink much. I didn't need to. Sleep comes fast when it wants to. Not because you're tired, but because something wants you vulnerable. I slipped under. In the dream, I wasn't in the jungle. I was underground again, back in the cave, but this time the walls pulsed. They were alive, not metaphorically, they actually breathed. I could feel the heartbeat in the stone, and the whispering, louder now, rhythmic, chant-like, not human words. In the center of the chamber stood a version of me, my same face, my same gear, but his eyes were completely black. He spoke without moving his mouth. "You're not the first version." Then everything collapsed into shadow. I woke up choking. The fire was out. My rifle was missing. I stood up, dizzy, and found it leaning against a tree several feet away, pointing directly at me. There were fresh prints in the dirt, my size, my tread, but I hadn't moved, or I thought I hadn't. I started running. On the 5th night, I made it to the edge of the airfield, a small local base used by oil survey teams and missionaries. I didn't care. I just needed a signal, a face, anything that wasn't a tree. I was halfway across the open field when I felt it again. The silence. Not natural silence, erasure. The engine hums faded. The wind died mid-breeze. My footsteps vanished again. It had followed me even here. I collapsed on the tarmac. When I came to, I was on a plane. Someone had found me, a pilot on an early supply run. I don't remember what I said. I must have looked feral. But they got me on board, handed me water, and said we'd be in the capital in 3 hours. As we took off, I looked out the window. The jungle below shimmered, not from heat. It pulsed, like it was watching me leave. And somewhere in the center, beyond the canopy, that cave sat like a wound, still open, still bleeding. Back in the capital, I tried to feel normal again. I stayed in a hotel, showered, shaved, bought new clothes. I walked into a cafe and ordered eggs. The woman smiled. But when I sat down, I noticed something on the table. Etched in the wood, scratched so deeply it had broken the varnish. You remember. It remembers you. I left the food untouched. I haven't eaten since. It's been 12 days. The silence comes and goes now. It's not constant. It teases. When I turn on music, it warps the sound. When I try to sleep, it fills the room. When I look into mirrors, sometimes the reflection lags. Just for a second, but I know. Something came back with me. And it's not interested in killing me. It wants me to see, to know, to become.
It started with the mirror in my hotel bathroom. I'd gone nearly a week avoiding my reflection, not out of vanity, out of fear. But on the 7th morning, I forgot. I turned on the light, brushed my teeth, looked up, and for a moment, less than a second, my reflection didn't move with me. It just stood there, toothbrush frozen in its mouth, staring back while my hand was already at the sink. I blinked. It was gone, back to normal. But the damage was done. That crack in reality, it spread. I tried to tell myself I imagined it. Trauma, sleep deprivation, maybe even a mild psychotic break. But then came the other signs. My passport disappeared. When I went to the U.S. Embassy to request a replacement, they pulled up my record and told me something I wasn't ready to hear. Sir, according to our files, you already left the country 2 days ago via commercial flight. Ticket was scanned, customs cleared. I stared at the clerk. I'm here, I said, pointing to my chest. He frowned. That's impossible. You were recorded on camera at the gate. Facial match, fingerprints confirmed. They even showed me the footage. It was me. Same face, same limp, same jacket with the blood-stained shoulder. But I hadn't boarded any flight. That thing had. I ran, out of the embassy, out into the blistering sun. My skin felt like it was shrinking on my bones. My breath came in short, ragged bursts. I ducked into an alley and vomited until I was empty. Then I saw the writing again, etched into the brick wall this time. It is becoming you. I stopped sleeping. It wasn't a choice. Whenever I closed my eyes, I'd wake up in places I didn't remember walking to. Park benches, hotel lobbies, twice in the middle of the road, once inside a bus that was already halfway to the border. It was hijacking me, piece by piece. I called an old colleague from university. He worked in psychological anthropology, knew about deep myth, the kind of knowledge buried in oral traditions. I told him what I was going through, most of it anyway. He hesitated for a long time. Then he said something strange. There's a theory that in some cultures,
Memory is a sacred currency. It defines not just identity, but existence. If something steals your memory, it's not just theft, it's replacement. It erases you by becoming the only record of you. I told him I hadn't forgotten anything. He paused again. Are you sure? Memory loss doesn't feel like forgetting. It feels like certainty where there should be doubt, like déjà vu that never stops. After the call, I checked my old journal, the one I'd written during the expedition. At first, everything seemed intact, but then I noticed an entry I didn't write. A full page, dated 4 days ago. In my handwriting, the silence is a gift. I understand now. There was never anything outside the cave. The cave was always inside me, and I've returned to it. I tore the page out and burned it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't fake, that it wasn't added. It was planted like a seed. And the horror? I recognized the phrasing. It sounded like me. Exactly like me. Just emptier. I left the hotel that night. Didn't pack, just walked into the city hoping I could lose myself in its sprawl. But even among thousands of people, I felt alone. Not metaphorically, literally. At some point in the early morning hours, I realized no one had looked at me in hours. No one had made eye contact. No one had bumped into me, acknowledged my presence, or reacted to me in any way. It was like I was fading from existence. I stopped at a storefront window and turned toward the glass. The street behind me was busy, but in the reflection, I was the only person there. I smashed the window, ran. I don't know how far or how long, just kept moving, chasing some vague idea that distance equaled safety. It didn't. At a bus station on the outskirts of the city, I collapsed on a bench and checked my phone. There were pictures in my gallery I hadn't taken. A smiling version of me in an airport, walking through a terminal, boarding a plane, hugging someone I didn't know, laughing. The timestamps in the videos, if you listened closely, had no sound, just that familiar, impossible silence. I booked a one-way ticket to anywhere, didn't care where, as long as it was away. While waiting, I went into the restroom and faced the mirror again. This time, I didn't flinch. I stared, waited, and then it blinked. Before I did. It tilted its head, just slightly. Enough. Then it smiled. Not a twisted smile, a perfect replica of mine. It looked content, satisfied, like it was winning. I left the restroom shaking, heart jackhammering in my chest. Boarded the bus, took a window seat, closed my eyes for just a second, and when I opened them, the world outside was gone. No jungle, no road, just stone walls, pulsing, alive. The cave again. I screamed, kicked at the seat, fought for air. And then I woke up, or thought I did, back on the bus, driver staring at me in the mirror with concern in his eyes. But he didn't speak, because he had no mouth. Just skin. Smooth, pale, where a mouth should be. I turned to the window. My reflection blinked, but I hadn't. There's no escape. That's the truth I've come to accept. It isn't following me anymore. It doesn't need to. It's inside me, threaded through every neuron, every doubt, every fading memory. I'm writing this because I still can, because I think soon I won't be able to. Soon it will write as me, and no one will know the difference. Maybe it already has. Do you remember who you are? I'm not sure I do. And if I don't remember myself, then who's writing this?
It was morning when I first realized something had broken. I woke up under fluorescent lights, white tile, gray walls, a tube of antiseptic from a hospital sink, a nurse's voice murmuring something over a clipboard. I tried to sit up and felt wires tug on my wrist. Confusion boxed my chest tighter than fear. The nurse knelt beside me, her lips parted slightly. "Good to see you awake, Mr. Peterson," she said. Beneath a calm mask, there was relief. Her eyes flicked toward a doorway. I didn't recognize the room, not my body. I tried to speak. "Where am I?" I croaked, throat gravel dry. She gave me a soft, trained smile. "General admission, head trauma, dehydration. You arrived by airlift last night." Her words sounded rehearsed. I felt explosive vertigo. My gaze sharpened through blurry awareness to the door behind her. A man stood at the threshold. My height, my build, my face. Only his eyes didn't react when he saw me. They flicked past mine and landed on the nurse. She stood. He moved toward me as if I didn't exist. She clasped his hand, whispered congratulations, then walked away. He didn't look back. They whisked me into a private room eventually, but I could hear him being paraded through the halls. "Michael Peterson, doing well. Flight to America later this week." The world treated him like the real me. Staff smiled. Visitors came. A colleague from a documentary studio dropped by, eyes glassy with joy. He hugged the man in my place. "Nothing to worry about," he said. Everything was fine. I tried to speak. I tried to show documents. I called for anyone, doctor, nurse, visitor, to stop. They didn't see me. I was invisible. A stripped version of my name replaced in news bulletins, social media posts, emails forwarding in my name, guests telling me they were excited for the next upload, funders rescheduling deadlines, all addressed to the imposter. I smuggled a hospital phone from a cabinet one night. I called my friend, the anthropologist. He answered stiffly. "This is Michael." His tone shifted. "That's strange, because here I have this man, same name, face, fingerprint match, who woke up after your flight arrival." I laughed bitterly. "He's a copy." Silence followed. Then he added, quietly, Maybe I got it wrong. Memory isn't always what we think it is." He hung up.
At dawn, I found a washing sink. I cupped my hands under the faucet and splashed water on my face. In the mirror, I saw wrinkles on my forehead, ones I earned in the jungle. Scars on my hand, tiny tattoos hidden under sleeves. I moved closer. The face that stared back was flawless. The imposter had no scars, no imperfections. I pounded the glass with fists. My voice echoed in the hall like there were two of me screaming. He appeared behind the door. He didn't hesitate. He walked through. The staff followed. No one stopped, no one held the door. When the crowd parted, he turned and gave a small nod. His lips curved into a smile, not at me, but through me, like I was a ghost in front of him. That afternoon, I followed him as he walked outside. Cameras flashed for journalists. He posed. People shook his hand. He answered questions. I tried to follow, behind him, barely visible, trying to flank, trying to be seen. But security, his security, herded me away. I passed a reflective glass wall. He held my face up to it and pointed. Then he looked back at the crowd, and I realized there was room for only one of us. The next morning, everything changed again. There were articles online. Michael Peterson resurfaces from jungle, shares harrowing story. He speaks in interviews, releases new footage. The imposter spoke eloquently. The real Michael was nowhere to be found. My hotel room was cleared, phone logged out, wallet gone, even my blood group and medical info replaced with his. They told the hospital I had recovered and was cleared for discharge. I wasn't. I managed to sneak one message to my anthropologist friend, sent from a phantom mobile, location tag suppressed. It took everything. I'm here, but not here. I can't reach you. Only you remember me. He replied, I don't know what's happening, but hold on, I'm trying. That's been 48 hours. I don't know my reflection anymore. I don't know which is the imposter. If he is me, or I'm him. But I remember, and if I remember, I exist.
I haven't slept in days. Not truly. Not without waking in sweat, gasping, clawing at walls that felt too smooth, too unfamiliar to be mine. The city feels foreign now. I don't mean the language or the streets. I mean the rhythm. Like the heartbeat of this place changed, slowed down, or maybe sped up. I walk down sidewalks and people pass me like I'm vapor. No one meets my eyes, not even beggars. I thought I escaped the jungle, but it followed me. The man who wears my face is on TV again tonight. A new documentary, something about survival, about facing fear. He speaks in my voice, my inflections, my subtle pauses. I don't know how he knows them, but he does. He even cried. I recognized the moment. It wasn't acted, it was mine. That breakdown in the cave when I found Aaron's notebook, soaked with blood and jungle rot. I didn't tell anyone about that. I never recorded it. How does he know? Unless he was there. Unless he is me. Or worse, something older wearing my skin like a trophy. I've stopped trying to reach people I knew. They don't remember. Photos of me with friends, gone. Email trails cut short. Even my passport seems to reject me. The digital signature mismatched. Bank cards disabled. I am, in every official system, dead or never born. I keep to alleys and rooftops now. I don't trust mirrors. I don't trust screens. Sometimes, in glass reflections, I catch glimpses of something walking just behind me, not quite shaped like a man. Long arms, too many joints, a head that tilts unnaturally when I turn. By the time I blink, it's gone. But it's not. Because each night, I wake with soil under my fingernails, bark shavings in my shoes, once moss growing on my pillow. It's pulling me back. Not just the jungle, the thing that sleeps beneath it. I thought about ending it. I won't lie. Standing on the edge of a construction site one night, wind howling past the beams. Below me, concrete weighted like a grave. A part of me begged to leap. But as I stepped forward, a voice spoke behind me. If you die, it lives forever. I turned, thinking I'd finally lost my mind. But it wasn't me who said it. It was him. The real Aaron. He looked hollow, gaunt, ribs showing through a torn shirt. Same man I'd last seen torn apart in the vines. But his eyes, God, his eyes were alive. He looked angry. "You let it in," he whispered. "It can't stay unless you believe it's stronger than you." He walked toward me, limping, fading with each step. "Tell the world, make them remember you. That's the only way." Then he was gone, and I was left on the edge, heart thundering in my chest, fists clenched so tight my nails broke skin. I broke into a news station that night. They'll say I was crazy, a madman yelling at anchors, dragging them toward the monitor bank, forcing them to look, to really see the differences between me and the man they call Michael. The subtle asymmetry in his jaw, the delay in his eye blinks, the way he avoids his own reflection in every shot. I made them listen until security dragged me away. I screamed into the cameras as they carried me out. "He's not me! I came back! I survived! I remember! And you will too, when it's too late!" They locked me up, of course. Padded walls, no windows. I keep dreaming of roots, long black roots growing through concrete, curling around my ankles, whispering secrets through my bones. But something's changing. They say people have started asking questions. Reddit threads popping up with old photos that don't match the new Michael. One reporter vanished after investigating the film crew. A viral clip shows the imposter speaking, but there's a split-second frame where his mouth doesn't move and the words still come out. People are noticing. The cracks are widening. And whatever's wearing my face, it's starting to panic. Last night, the walls whispered a name to me. A name that doesn't exist in any book, any scroll, any scripture. It's not meant to be spoken. It's meant to be remembered in silence. And when I mouthed it in the dark, the lights flickered. Something growled from beneath the floor, and I swear to God I heard the imposter scream, not in fear, but in rage, because he knows I'm not going anywhere.
I'm not sure how long they kept me here. Time doesn't move normally in this place. There are no clocks, no sunrise, just a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead and the humming silence that presses against my skull like a second skin. But I think they're starting to believe me. Not because of anything I said, because he slipped, the thing wearing my face. It got arrogant. 2 weeks ago, a nurse came in with a tablet. It was routine, some dumb therapy program they make us follow. But when she turned the screen toward me, a live stream was playing. A late-night interview with him. He smiled the way I smile, laughed the way I used to laugh. But then they asked him a question I never expected. Do you ever think about the ones who didn't make it back? And he answered, they served their purpose. That was it. Just those 4 words. But his face, his voice, slipped when he said it. For a split second, he wasn't me anymore. His jaw twitched sideways, his pupils shrank, the skin beneath his eyes cracked like drying mud. And people saw it. Since then, strangers have been showing up at the facility. Not reporters, not family. People like me. Survivors. One guy claimed he came back from the Himalayas and swears the same thing happened. Another said he woke up in a desert town with no memory, but kept dreaming of something beneath him. They all say the same thing. Something ancient is wearing us. One by one. And we let it in. I've been moved to a different wing now. Less secure,
still watched, but with books and paper and a real bed. They want me to write it down, everything, every detail. They say the more people read it, the more eyes see the truth, the weaker it gets. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is the only way we win. Not with guns, not with prayers, but with memory, with truth. So if you're still watching this, still listening to my voice, remember me. My name is Jackson Moore. I was part of a private expedition in the heart of the Amazon. We weren't hunting treasure. We weren't looking for fame. We were running from ourselves. And the jungle gave us exactly what we deserved. It didn't kill us. It replaced us. And if one day someone knocks on your door wearing the face of someone you love, someone who shouldn't be there, ask them this: what did you see in the dark? If they answer with anything other than silence, run. And never, ever look behind you when the wind goes silent.